Alright, welcome. This is going to be a quick training on Pfeiffer rebuilding for the extra dry pumps. So basically what we have here tool-wise, this is a component that actually is used once we've taken it partially apart. This is another tool for the instrument, and this is a little torque wrench for the instrument as well. It uses a metric set. We'll also need this wrench actually for torquing this piece. You'll want a few screwdrivers, and we have a torque wrench. Alright, so we're going to start taking this apart. And I'm going to turn this around so you can see it. One of the very first things that we're going to have to do is unscrew this connector piece. Once it's ready, it'll just come right off. We have our little service tag here, which isn't really used very much, but we try to put little notes as to when things were last taken apart. So now we're going to start taking off these top pieces. Sometimes these things can be very tight. Right now we're just kind of loosening them up. Alright, now that we've given them kind of an initial loosening, we're going to prop this on its side. So right here we have a Pfeiffer basic maintenance kit. So it's some replacement parts in there, but the box also makes a great place to stand it on its side. Typically at this piece, these screws will come up nice and easy. They'll basically end up coming up to about flush with the surface. Appears as though that screw was giving us some trouble because the head has some strippage. These pumps typically need to be rebuilt every 6 months, sometimes much more often. So now that we have the screws, we believe, out, or at least mostly loose, take this top piece off. And you'll see there are a number of components. So we've got these 4 screws here, which can easily come out just by turning it upside down. Now also we'll want to make sure that we separate which side the components came from, because both sides are different. One is a high pressure, one is a low pressure. So we have this rubber piece here, and this right here is one of the valves. So as you can see, it's very dirty. They're all very dirty. This brown stuff you see is actually Teflon dust. So we're going to set this all on a chem wipe, just so we don't get this stuff everywhere. We will have to clean it later with alcohol. We have an O-ring. This O-ring will be discarded. That is one of the items that we're replacing. So now that we have this block like this, we're going to take off the other top. Once we've done that, we will then remove both blocks from the pump. unfortunately, this is just boring labor. Wow, see how black that is. So this is a different kind of thing which we can see sometimes happens. It's very black, and it's really just all over all of it. It's like a powder. I'm going to place this all on a Kim wipe. So the components are very similar, although this valve is made of a rubber rather than more of a Teflon type surface. So now that we've done that, we're going to try to remove these blocks. Now it's a very delicate thing. There are some metal gaskets that actually line both sides. We need to make sure that we don't break them and that we don't damage any of the components. Because I've got all this grit on me, I'm going to change my gloves so I don't make our pump any dirtier than it already was. And we're going to attempt now to pry up this block. So typically we'll try that with a screwdriver from multiple angles, doing it very slowly and carefully. This is probably one of the most difficult, or not difficult, careful things you have to do. The rest doesn't matter quite so much. So basically we would take kind of a spot and try to pry just a little bit. Try to take another spot, maybe gain some leverage. Just a little bit like that on the different corners. You can feel it giving a little bit, which is great. Aha! So this is now free, and there is a piston. As you can see, the piston's moving. Just comes right up. There's one of the gaskets. It's a very thin metal strip. They vary in size, vary in thickness, depending upon how they were constructed. So it's chosen by the factory. I guess they figure out what thickness each one needs. So you do need to make sure that you remember which side was on which and from what side of the pump they came from. Many cases they are stamped. This looks like it is, looks like this one says 20. So we will also clean these gaskets. So now that we've got the piston, we want to put a nice Kim wipe against it to kind of coddle it. Probably the best term. We want to protect it. We don't want it to get damaged. So kind of put the Kim wipe around it so it doesn't bump up against the side. And now we'll lift off the other one. So we won't really be able to brace it too well this time, but we can brace it a little bit. Then we get another box, brace it up against another box. As you can see, this gasket's trying to escape, and that's okay. So all these different components will get cleaned before it all goes back together. So now we have this piston. We're going to protect it with a Kim wipe. Set the pump down. Now we're going to take off this front piece. Same driver. These typically come out very nicely. There is also an O-ring on the other side of this front panel. As you can see, it's right in here, and we'll be discarding that too. So the next piece we want to do is we want to take off this bolt. Before we do that, we'll need to secure this entire assembly. So if you look up here, you can see that this rotates to a nice flat side. We will take our tool, this weird metal tool, and this guy will just get inserted right here. We'll use 2 of the screws from the front panel, and we will tighten this down in just a moment. Now there is a little bit of a trick that we have developed, just using a little bit of an extra piece. In the kit you'll find post-it notes, and we just kind of put the little post-it notes under there, and that will get rid of some of the slack that will be there. Just this way it helps in the removal and putting on process, since we're going to put some torque against this assembly. So finger tight is good enough. Torque. Just like that. So there's a couple components here. Washer. Right there. Nut and washer. We have, this is a weight. It's also very dirty. Then comes a spacer. Then, in this case, the right piston. Okay, so that's the piston. Then there's a spacer. And then the left piston. Now you'll note these pistons have an arrow on them to indicate the orientation. Many times they might have an L on it or an R on it. Just kind of lets us know which side they're on. So this is the gutless piece at this point. In further rebuilds we may take more of this out, but for now, as you can see, it's very dirty. There's a lot of what we might call Teflon dust in there. So we're going to have to clean all of this out with some alcohol, get it nice and clean, and if we're doing a bigger rebuild, a plus rebuild, we will take out this block and some other components behind it, do some lubrication, and then put it back together. So that concludes this part of the training. Thank you very much, and I hope that was helpful.